Now that we are celebrating the 120th birthday of the Rebbe and Yud Alef Nissan, what's on the mind of every chassid is he wants to make hachlotas of doing things that will give the Rebbe nachas ruach. And if we want to call it, we'll call it matonas, as the Rebbe said, matonas to the Rebbe in honor of his birthday. So I think, and it's for sure, that probably the most important thing that we have to do is to see what we could do to strengthen the hiskashas to the Rebbe. And we know that one of the things, and probably the most important thing in hiskashas to the Rebbe, is learning the Rebbe's Torah. We know that it says, Tzadikim daimim lebeiram. Tzadikim are similar to their creator, to the Eibishter. And by the Eibishter, we know the greatest hiskashas you can get to the Eibishter Kaviyachal is through Torah. And the reason it says is because the Eibishter put himself into the Torah. The first word of Aseres Adibris, which is basically the first word of Matan Torah, is Anoichi. And Anoichi, the Gemara says, is a Rosh Tevis, Ano Nafshi Ksovis Yehovis. I wrote myself in and gave myself into the Torah. And since Tzadikim Deim Lebeiram, Tzadikim also put themselves into the Torah. And therefore, when you learn Torah of the Rebbe, you really connect to the Rebbe. Now, I know for sure that whatever I'm going to say now is not going to be new. Every chassid knows all the details about the importance of learning the Rebbe's Torah. But nevertheless, it's important from time to time, especially a time like this, to review it, to talk about it. There's a word from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I think in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, where he says on the Posik, of the ha'emunah v'nichras ha'mepiyem, the emunah was lost, and it's taken out of their mouth. The Poshup Pshat is, there's both expressions is the same thing. You lost the emunah, and you don't talk about it. But the Baal Shem Tov says that the Pshat is, of the ha'emunah, why is the emunah lost? Because v'nichras ha'mepiyem, because you don't talk about it. It's taken out of your mouth. So even if it's something that you know, we all have emunah, we know, nevertheless, you have to talk about it, because if you don't talk about it, even the reason is because it's so simple and you know about it, and therefore there's no reason to talk about it, it's still important to talk about it, to refresh your memory and to refresh yourself and to strengthen it. And therefore, when it comes to talking about the importance of learning Rebbe's Torah, for sure, even though everyone knows about it, but nevertheless, it's important to talk about it. And at a time like this, it's important for everybody to take a hachlote to strengthen their learning in the Rebbe's Torah. And this is especially important after Gimel Tammuz. We know the word that the Rebbe Rashab said, Psashis Istalkes, Ich gehe in Himmel und die Ksovim lo zichaich. I'm going to heaven, and the Ksovim, my manuscripts, I'm leaving to you. And the Rebbe asked the obvious kasha, why did he have to say that? Well, it's obvious he's not taking the manuscripts up to him with himself to Shamayim. So it's obvious he's leaving it down here. So the Rebbe says what the Rebbe Rashab meant, that Ich gehe in Himmel, I'm going to the Himmel, leaving this world. So b'meile, it would seem that our connection is not going to be so strong anymore. So he's saying no. Aber die Ksovim lo zichaich, I'm leaving my Ksovim, my morim, my manuscripts, I'm leaving to you. And b'meile, I'm not really leaving. The connection is still there. So therefore, after Gimel Tammuz, when we don't see the Rebbe physically, so the real way to have the connection is through learning the Rebbe's Torah. That's the way we strengthen our hiskashras, is through learning the Rebbe's Torah. Because the Rebbe put himself into his Torah. And even though there are other things that we do that the Rebbe wanted us to do, nevertheless, it seems like that the main way of Ich gehe in Himmel, and it should not be that he's leaving us, is through the Ksovim, through the learning Torah. And it's self-understood, because we learn in Tanya that the greatest yichud, the greatest union that could be between two things, is when a person understands in his brain an idea of somebody else. There it talks about Torah. The greatest yichud there could be in anything is when a yid learns Torah of the Eibishter, and since the Eibishter is in the Torah, your brain becomes one with the Torah, which automatically becomes one with the Eibishter. And that's a yichud that there's no other yichud. Yichud means hiskashres, connection. Same thing when you learn the Rebbe's Torah. When you learn the Rebbe's Torah, you get connected to the Rebbe in such a way that nothing else in the world could connect you so much like learning the Rebbe's Torah. And therefore, it's very important that we want to make achlotes, and we want to give the Rebbe matana for Yud Alef Nissan, especially this year of 120 years, which is a very special milestone. So the most important thing is that we should make our achlotas b'negei learning the Rebbe's Torah. And learning the Rebbe's Torah includes all the svarim of the Rebbe. It includes the Maimorim, it includes Likutei Sichos, it includes the Sichos Kodesh, the Teras Menachem, which is a Lashon Kodesh version that's worked on in the Sichos of the Rebbe, the Igris of the Rebbe, the Rishimis of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is in it all. And we have to strengthen our way of doing it to be marbe in learning the Rebbe's Torah. And that will be the real iskashas that we have to the Rebbe, and it'll give the Rebbe the biggest nachas roach. But we also have to remember that besides the union of iskashas that we have when we learn the Rebbe's Torah, learning the Rebbe's Torah has something very, very special. Not only because of the iskashas, which is the most important part, but the Rebbe's Torah is so that it gives us certain insights and things which otherwise we wouldn't know. Avada, what the Rebbe says, is all based on chassidus. But the way the Rebbe brings it down in a way that we could relate to it. He takes the same inyonim that in Chassidus, but in Chassidus it talks about with Sfiras Olyenis, and it talks about these inyonim of Keser and Atik and all the different ilamas. The Rebbe takes these inyonim and brings it down to us. So if you learn the Rebbe's Torah, you have a complete different outlook on everything. A different outlook on Welt, in Ashkofa Welt, a different outlook on Torah, a different outlook on Avos Yisrael, a different outlook on Amunah. It strengthens your Amunah in a way that you could understand what the Amunah is, which we could relate to it, even though it's in Yeruchni. I just want to say a story, but I was in a plane, and I met a younger man, not a Lubavitcher, Chassidish younger man from a different Chassidus, not a Lubavitcher. And he told me that till of Zion Oder, when the Rebbe had the stroke, for the last few years before that, he would come to 770 every day, or sometimes twice a day, to Mincha Ma'ariv or to Shachis, in order to look at the Rebbe's face. And he told me, I did not become a Lubavitcher Chassid. I never wrote to the Rebbe. But I came to look at the Rebbe's face. I asked him why. To show a Koras HaTev. Koras HaTev for what? And this is what he told me. When he was already Elter Bocher, in those circles, Elter Bocher doesn't mean very old, but when he was already a Bocher of age, certain Sfeikis started coming into his mind. Sfeikis of Emunah in Yonim of Yiddishkeit, and it wasn't going in the right direction. He was very afraid where it's going to lead to. Then he got married, and the Sfeikis continued. He said till one day he was sitting in shul, and it was time between Mincha Ma'ariv, and they were waiting. So people just looked into Svarim. There was a sefer on the table. He picked up the sefer. Happened to be Likutei Sichos. Okay, but the Sichos from Lubavitcher Rebbe. He opened it up, waiting for Ma'ariv, and he started reading there, and he saw that the Rebbe discusses one of the questions in Amunah that he had. So he started reading it, and he said he never saw anything like it. The way it's explained, it mamish saved him. And what happened further? He started looking more. He started learning more. Look at the Sichos. He says he never saw any sefer that should discuss it in such a way in the Amiti Soinyonim, but in a way that we could understand it, and it relates to me. And he says, Poshet, the Rebbe Svarim, saved my life, he says. And he's a real Frumer Chassidish younger man. This is what you get from the Rebbe's Torah, a different outlook. You see in Torah what a Yid is. If you look in the Rebbe's Torah, you see how we're supposed to look at a Yid. When we say always Avos Yisrael, a Yid, the Neshama, but the way the Rebbe explains it, the concept of a Yid, and the Neshama of a Yid, and the specialty of a Yid, you will not get it anywhere else. It comes from Chassidus. The Rebbe didn't make up things. It's all based on, from the Baal Shem Tov, from Chassidus, from all the Rabbeim, but the way the Rebbe put it down, it's something that you don't have before. The same thing in looking at how we look at the truth of Torah. You only see it in the Rebbe's Torah. The diyukim that the Rebbe makes, and every word in Torah is emes. Every little thing means something. When you have a few pirushim on one word, there is a meaning to it. Everything, the have a meaning in Torah is also Torah. This is something that before that people weren't so medayik in it. The Rebbe, you see from the Rebbe why? It's all based on one thing. Because in the Rebbe's Torah, you see the emes kite of Torah, and therefore if it's emes, it has to be emes through and through from beginning to end. And you learn that out from the Rebbe's Torah. And that we take from the Rebbe's Torah, like I said before, even more than we take from Chassidus, because Chassidus is the source, but this is the way, the same thing in the source relates to us. Just to give an example, in Tanya and in other Maimorim, we always learn about the Maimer Chazal, the Iker Kavanis, the Sava Kadosh Baruch Hu, Lias L'Dira B'Tachtenim. It's there, it's true, and we learn it, we know. But in the Rebbe's Sichos, that is brought down in such a way that it explains to us the real meaning of it. And every second Sikha is connected to this inyan, and the Rebbe explains this to us, not in such high, lofty ways, even though he goes into that too, but he brings it down very close to us. So when the Rebbe quoted the Zohar, where it says in the Zohar that on the Posik, where it says that Shnash Heishmeis Shono L'Chaye Neach, when Neach was 600 years old, then the Arubas Hashemayim, the Mayonis, the wells from springs from down here started coming up, and the windows in heaven started opening and it came down. So it says in Zohar, this refers that in the year Tov Reish of the Elef Hashishi of this millennium, the Chochmah will start. Chochmah de Lamato, the things that come Lamata, which is Chochmah Chetzoni, is the Chochmah of science, Lahavdil, and the Chochmah of Lamaila will open up, and there will be a new level in the Chochmah. And the Rebbe explains this means the Giloy Achsidis, and once the Rebbe said it goes even in the Inyan and Nigla. The Giloy in Nigla, a new way of learning, which you connect it to the Ragachover, etc. But I think we could say, Benegay the Rebbe in the Stera. There is the Rebbe, even in Nigla, what the Rebbe did, he brings out new Musogim, new Inyanim and Torah. And when you learn the Rebbe Siches, you become a lamden in Nigla. You become a maskal in Chassidus. You become a maven in these inyanim. I know for myself, in a lot of the shurim that I give in yeshiva in Nigla, a lot of it is based on Yesodis of the Rebbe's Torah, even in different inyanim, because the Rebbe brought out new Yesodis. That's what one of the pshatim in the Sinyan, that the Arubas Hashemayim niftochu, the windows of heaven opened up, that we have a deeper light in Torah. This is the Eir Chodesh that the Rebbe brought. So the bottom line, we have to get back to the point. The point is that when it comes Yud Aleph Nisan, especially this year, every year has to be like that. Every day has to be. Every year Yud Aleph Nisan. But this year Yud Aleph Nisan, which is special milestone, we have to remember that what we have to do is make a hachlote to learn more the Rebbe's Torah. In whichever way, whether you learn it directly in the Sichos. Now there are so many svarim which are collections of the Rebbe's Torah on different subjects. So when we have a subject of Refuah, there are Svarim on Refuah, all taken from the Rebbe's Sichos. Any subject we have. So if we take from the Rebbe's Torah, so we get the real look at the things, and the main thing is, this is Mekasher us to the Rebbe, and it gives the Rebbe's Nachas Ruach. And the Rebbe is Mashpia to us. We know it says, we said Tzadikim Deim Lebeirem, the Tzadikim are like the Eibishter. We know that the Eibishter, the Torah with the Eibishter, it says, anybody who learns HaKadosh Baruch Hu Keira V'Sheina Kenegdei, the Eibishter learns with him. The Eibishter, you always, no such thing as without a Chavrus. If you learn Torah, the Eibishter, who's the one in the Torah, learns with you. Tzadikim Deim Lebeirem. So we could say that when you learn the Rebbe's Torah, the Rebbe is learning with you. So imagine, learning the Rebbe's Torah, you have a Chavrusa. The Eibishter Avad is learning with you because you're learning Torah. But at the same time, the Rebbe is your Chavrusa. He's Keira V'Sheina Kenegdei, like the Eibishter, because Tzadikim Deim Lebeirem. So there is nothing greater than that. So we should keep that in mind, that together with all the other achlotas that we make, which we should make about miftzoyim and about making meizdes, the greatest things which are important, which gives the Rebbe the greatest nachas ruach, we have to keep in mind that on top of the list is making up to learn more of the Rebbe's Torah, and that will give us the greatest iskashres. And it strengthens not only our iskashres, it makes the Rebbe's iskashres to us, which is there always anyway, but it makes it more begilui, and this will be the last thing that we'll have to do in this Zman HaGolus, and from here we will go to the Gula Shleima B'Korev Mamish.